about Conway's Law and its implications all the more during the coronavirus. So as you would be knowing that whether we like it or not, work from home is a de facto thing that's been followed all across all companies. So which means most of us are working from remote locations, and companies structures are such that you no longer have co-located teams. People are sitting in multiple places. So it's quite important to understand the impact of Conway's Law, which was actually formulated by Melvin Conway in the 1960s, who was a computer programmer himself. And then people didn't take his law quite seriously, but it has serious implications in the way organizations build products and solutions. And it's quite effective to understand how that law really works. It just says that the organizations, the architecture of a product or a solution typically mimics the communication mechanism that is there within the teams that actually end up producing those products. So that is a good way to, so in fact, they did a research study in MIT, and as per the study, it was found that teams which were co-located and were all huddled up in the same place, they ended up producing monolithic, non-modular architectures. Whereas teams that were distributed and loosely coupled by nature of being away, they ended up creating better interfaces, and they were able to communicate with each other quite well, and the communication strategies worked quite well. So that is one of the advantages of one direct way in which you can actually look at how Conway's Law really works in the real life. So another example is typically when you have an e-commerce website. So they find that the e-commerce website is being designed by people who actually it mimics the communication mechanisms within the company. So probably this team which is working on the legacy code transformation, and they need to integrate with the payment gateway. So they found a caching method which was being used by the team that is sitting in the next room. So they just ended up using that. And in the same product, there's another team which is working from another building, and they were close to the let us say the retail team, and retail team is perhaps using another caching method. So they ended up using that, and instead of like having the holistic central view of what's happening, people end up using and replicating architectures left, right, and center without paying heed to what the customer outcome is in effect. It really impacts the way you create products and solutions. They end up mimicking your communication structures rather than what the customer wants. So this is actually what the Conway's Law is about. So these days you've got Microsoft Teams, Slack, and a lot of internal, external chatbots that you can use to enable communication apart from virtual video conferencing, web conferencing, and so on. So that is there is another postulate which is going to help you get over this problem. So it says that if you want to create better products and solutions, then fix your organization first, and then the architecture will follow. So that is the way to look at it. So which means to say that first you fix what is the way your teams are going to work with each other, and then how they are going to be co-located or distributed, fix that. And that's the same kind of philosophy that is actually postulated by Mike Kirsten in his book, wherein he actually gives, he says that if you want to build great products, then fix the systems that actually produce those great products. So this is similar to that kind of a philosophy, that if you want to create great products, then first fix the systems that are involved in creating those great products. So that's a similar thought that is there. And typically what happens is if you there is this joke that if you ask 5 people to build a compiler, then you will get a compiler with n-1, that is 4 pass compiler, and which actually means one person actually ends up being the manager, which is being factored that way. So unless you actually decide on the way in which your teams should work with each other, you will not be able to create great products and solutions. So that is the way Conway's law works. And Conway's law has got a lot of implications all across the way we do business. So DevOps actually has solved quite a few things for the Conway, which are the problems resulting from bad communication. This famous question, who broke the build? So was it you, was it this team, or was it the QA team, and was it the dev team, what is the production, and was it somebody else? It was a blame game that used to happen typically, and DevOps has actually streamlined that whole thing because of the continuous delivery, continuous integration paradigm, wherein at least a lot of those communications between development and operations is all factored within that big box, which is DevOps or DevSecOps, if you have to look at security per se. So that has tackled that kind of and reduced a lot of these interactions. So typically, if you've got a company which has got several teams that are working like sales, marketing, or multiple lines of business, and they're trying to create products and solutions, so sales doesn't talk to marketing, marketing doesn't talk to finance, finance doesn't talk to HR properly. So they are all siloed in their approach. They have to go through a lot of protocol to get to communicating with each other well. And then in that case, the entire architecture of the product or solution suffers. So wherein if you've got if you minimize the amount of interactions between them, like a two pizza team, or people sit next to each other, they huddled up, and then give them a single pointed focus as the objective, then you can bypass a lot of the issues that are as a result of the Conway's mechanism. This is not to say that globally large distributed teams are not effective, but it needs a central interoperability. There should be a central governing team which is actually taking care of what's happening across these teams. So they found out that small teams are more effective in handling and delivering on initiatives. So typically you've got these SWAT teams which have to fix traumas for patients, like the round-the-clock Corona COVID teams that are attending to life-threatening situations that patients are going through around the clock. And then you've got these war teams that are there. The SWAT teams have been given autonomous liberty to jump on the situation and do what's needed, and they have a single pointed focus without getting distracted. And if you take the example of the Formula One racing team, when they go to the pit stop, so that team which needs to overhaul the whole engine has got they need to work in seconds and get the tire all machine entirely overhauled in that, and then every second counts in the laps. So Conway's law really makes a lot of sense, that when people are communicating effectively with each other without all of these overheads of, okay, you need to go to this team, we need to go to jump across the wall, go meet them. So all of those things, every single communication jump is actually going to cause you a lot of communication delays. And if you can avoid this, then you can actually build great products and solutions. So that's essentially what the Conway's mechanism is. So if you want to ask Conway's law, which is that if you've got similar sort of people sitting next to each other, then the face of the product changes altogether. So it so happened that if you have an aeronautical engineer or a guidance and navigation control kind of an engineer who's studied control theory and aviation fueling and all that, and if they are made to design pharma software or banking software, for instance, or the hotel industry, so there I remember in one of the instances when we were describing our architecture, we found that the person was actually using his aeronautical engineering mindset to design a banking system. So typically the culture of your organization is what determines how you are going to create products and solutions. So how easily do you allow people to mingle with each other? So your hierarchy chart or your org chart is just a list of all the titles, and pretty much it is a false representation of the actual culture and the dynamics of what really happens. So you need to see who actually reports to, it's not just about who reports to whom, how do teams interact with each other. So I remember there used to be this famous DBA, and he used to be always not available in calls for whatever reason, nothing against DBS per se, but it so happened that he was located somewhere else and he was not contactable. So that really actually is not a good sign for organization development and growth and the culture. So you really need to figure what works for your organization, what is the culture that is really needed to make it happen. And typically what is really found is that you need to do the John Boyd's OODA loop quite quickly. So it's not the strongest that wins, it is the team that is able to iterate on, observe, orient, direct and act. So if you, in the John Boyd's experiment, the F-16s, though they were the weaker planes, they were able to always win in a dogfight. So similarly, it's the organizations that are able to change quickly, iterate quickly, and come to quicker iterations. They are the ones who are going to poise to win this digital game.